Hello everyone, welcome to the Sunday Guardian show by Joyeeta Basu after a New Year break. I'm the editor of the weekly newspaper, the Sunday Guardian, published from New Delhi. And today on my show, I have got a very special guest. As you can see, this book, Russia-Ukraine War, the conflict and its global impact. It has been written by Colonel Ajay Singh. He's ex-army, of course, although it is not written here, but he's very much army. And he's also an author, an award-winning author. And today we are going to talk about the Russia-Ukraine war, specifically in the context of his book. Welcome to the show, Colonel Ajay Singh. The first thing I want to ask you is, the thing is that, you see, the first thing I want to ask you is that, I mean, like many Indians, of course, in your book, you seem a little sympathetic towards Russia's concerns about NATO expansion, which apparently forced Russia to invade Ukraine. But don't you think by that logic, every other country will start invading other countries by saying some kind of a security threat is there, and that will be the end of the rules-based order? Now, how can there be any justification for what Russia has done?
Thanks, Joyeeta. Firstly, it's a pleasure being on your show, and it's a very pertinent question you asked me. Like you brought out in my book, The Russia-Ukraine War, I won't say I'm sympathetic towards Russia's causes for invading. I would say I understand the security concerns. There is no justification for an invasion of another country, none whatsoever. The only thing I want to have brought out in my book is the fact that Russia security concerns or the fact that NATO had expanded 1,000 kilometers eastwards from 1999 onwards till they've come onto the doorstep of Russia. Remember, the basic cause of this war was when Ukraine decided to take membership of NATO, and they had it enshrined in the constitution, which Putin, his response was, don't they see it? If NATO comes here, their missiles will hit Moscow in 3 minutes. We have no place beyond to go. So their demands that firstly, Ukraine should not join NATO. Secondly, was they should have written guarantees for the same, I would say was justified. No less a person than Kissinger and other notable personalities have warned that Russia's sensibility should not be taken lightly. And when it was, Putin should not have invaded. I do not condone an invasion at all. But yes, the West should have taken side of Russia's security sensitivities.
Yeah, okay. Now, you see, Russia expected to win. I mean, when they invaded Ukraine on 24th February 2022, they expected to win the war inside a few weeks, perhaps even 7-10 days. But the fact of the matter is that 1 year later, and Russia is in no position to declare a victory now. So, what kind of military miscalculations Russia could have made? What gains that it has made, and can it hold on to such gains, if there are any gains?
Now that's a very, very deep question, Joyeeta. And yeah, let me tell you, to understand the miscalculations which Russia would have made, I would like to just show up a small map. I'd just like to show a small screen to you, please. Okay. This is the. Can you see the screen?
No, not yet.
What is it? Okay. Now, can you see the screen?
No, not yet.
1 minute, please.
Is your screen sharing off? It's.
Yeah.
You have to show your screen. I think right now
yes,
I can see it.
Can you see it now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. I deliberately wanted to show this map to you because this brings out the scale of the Russian invasion. You take a look at it. They advanced from the entire frontier of Ukraine, which is almost 2,400 kilometers long. I would feel the first Russian miscalculation was the scale of the invasion. Had they even focused on just the south or on the east in the initial days, it would have been a different story. Or had they only focused on the north, yes, they might have got gains. The other major miscalculation was the fact that they did not estimate Ukrainian response well. And to that, I think from what the reports bring out is, Putin was misled by advisors who, like most military advisors, said, yeah, kar lenge. We shall reach there in 2 weeks flat. They expected a military victory in 2 to 3 weeks, like they did in Georgia in 6 days. That was the second miscalculation. And the third and major miscalculation was in the timing of the war. They launched an attack on the 24th of February. At the time when the spring thaw is just coming in, their tanks cannot move off road. The ground has become slush. So the speed of that advance, which is so essential in the initial days, was not provided to them, which is what bogged them down and finally led them to a stalemate. And I think the last miscalculation was they did not expect NATO and the West to supply Ukraine and provide them such material and moral support what they have been doing. The inclusion of Western aid is and the grim determination with which the Ukrainians have been fighting is what has changed the course of the war. That is where Putin had gone wrong.
Yeah, and when it comes to whatever they have gained, will they be able to hold on to it or?
Yeah, now that's another very good. You see, like a lot of the news people, when we talk of the war, we talk about first, okay, they say, okay, the Russians withdrew from Kiev, which actually was quite a balanced thing to do at that point of time, because once that initial shock action to capture by an airborne assault failed, they had no way of capturing Kiev. So they moved out, they withdrew from the northern area of Kiev and they focused on the south, along the entire coastal regions. Okay, and if you take a look at it, the towns of Mariupol, Melitopol, Kherson, Mykolaiv, right up to Zaporizhzhia, they have captured. In the east also, most of the northeast, the area of the Donbass, which they're focusing on, the provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk. In the period between, I would say, April to August and September is the time in which the Russians have taken this entire area, which I'm showing on the map. Now, this area comprises of 4 of Ukraine's richest provinces. All of Kherson, except for the parts which the Ukraine have retaken now.
You mean resource rich?
Sorry? It's resource rich. The richest factories, the richest granaries lie in this area. Okay. Look at the coastline. They have taken every port except for Odessa and have controlled the Black Sea completely. Today, Russia has taken over 15% of Ukraine's, like you correctly brought out, richest areas. So the gains have been considerable. We should not really wish it away. It has been considerable. Coming on to your other point, will they be able to hold it? I'm going to discuss this when we discuss the Ukrainian counteroffensive next.
Yeah. Now, so what would you say of Ukraine's counteroffensive? Now, they seem to be holding up pretty well and apparently also making gains and regaining certain areas that Russia had taken.
Yes, you're absolutely right in this, when you can see the map, na? The screen?
Yeah, I can see the screen, yes.
Yeah. Now, when you take a look at the Ukrainian counteroffensive, the areas marked in blue are the areas where the Ukrainians have counterattacked. Now, this, you really have to take a hats off to the military acumen of the Ukrainians to have captured that area in the manner they did. And as a military man, I can't resist explaining this offensive to you. In the area of the south, in Kherson, they launched a series of diversionary feints, and they drew Russian reaction to it. The minute the Russians reacted in the south, they launched a major attack in Kharkiv, in which they recaptured in a matter of just 3 days, area which had taken the Russians 2 months to capture, because the Russians had pulled out of that area. Then again they pushed forward in the offensive in the south in the Kherson, and as you know, just in the month of November, they recaptured the town of Kherson. Now, this counteroffensive, if you take a look at it, it has recaptured around 6 to 8,000 square kilometers which they had lost. It is not much in terms of overall territory. It's not much. Russia still holds on to so much area, but the manner in which they did it, and the speed and the ease of recapturing the area brings out a lot of very valid lessons for the future. It means that the Ukrainian look. Firstly, the thing is, the Ukrainians were given intelligence by the US. I think that was a deciding factor. All the gaps in the Russian positions were revealed to the Ukrainians. That intelligence was invaluable. Now, the other thing was they had got a lot of very good equipment, especially the HIMARS, the long-range high-mobility artillery system, which would strike targets deep into the rear. And the third was the fact that the manpower which Ukraine had was very motivated. I mean, they were conscripts like the Russians, but they were fighting for the land. They were motivated. They had been trained in USA, Britain, Germany, and they're coming into the battlefield ready to die for their country. These three factors made a difference. And today, where the counteroffensive stands is, they have pushed the Russians back in the northeast, in the Donetsk region. Of course, as you know, the Russians have launched a couple of limited counteroffensives. In the south, they have taken Kherson. The battles to the front lines are now poised near the river of the Dnieper River in the south, and around the Donetsk River in the northeast. Beyond this, what happens? Let us see.
Yeah, so you are saying that the weapons that have come from the US in particular have played a major role in helping Ukraine. If you could explain a little more about that.
Yes. See, the weaponry, firstly, as you know, Ukraine had got a lot of Soviet era legacy weapons. They've handled it very well. The tide began, but the thing is, I'll give you a small example. The Ukrainians had T-62 tanks, the Russians had T-72 and T-80, which are almost half a generation better than that. The Ukrainians had got MiG-27, MiG-29 jets, the Russians had got Sukhoi. So the same family of systems, but both qualitatively and quantitatively, the Russians had an edge. Now, when US and Western equipment started pouring in, once more, something say like their Javelin anti-tank missiles and the new generation light anti-tank weapons. This small piece of equipment was responsible for stalling so many armor thrusts. The Stinger missiles, it ensured that the Russians could not get dominance of the air. It ensured that the low-flying Russian jets and the attack helicopters could not dominate the battlefield. This equipment made a tremendous amount of difference. Now, as you know, sophisticated air defense systems are coming in. They got a battery of Patriot missiles. And just last week, there was a very telling announcement. UK and USA and Germany, they are willing to provide tanks and armored fighting vehicles to the Ukrainians, including almost a squadron of Challenger 2 tanks. So, with this coming in, I would say the qualitative edge is now shifting towards Ukraine.
Okay. Now, so which way is the war headed then? Is peace possible or is it the war getting more intensified?
Well, I'm going to take a question one at a time. Which way the war is headed? Like I've told you, at this point of time, the war is at a stalemate. It's at a stalemate on the river lines. The Dnieper in the south, like I brought out, and around the Dnieper River in the northeast. Martial winter has come in. So large-scale offensives are not going on. The Russians have launched their own local counteroffensives in the northeast, which recently recaptured the town of Soledar, and the Bakhmut areas. But my reading is these are local actions. Today, it is a winter-induced stalemate going on.
Okay.
It is also a dangerous pause, a dangerous lull before the storm. If you look back on history, whenever the Russians have been pushed back, they always respond with very strong and powerful counteroffensives. Look at the Second World War in Moscow, in Stalingrad. And those counteroffensives are so mammoth in scale, they turned the tables. Today, it is common knowledge by intelligence sources Russia is preparing for its offensive. They have mobilized almost 1 lakh conscripts, which have beefed up their lines. They have perhaps pulled up troops from the Siberian front. It is anticipated that around January, February, they will launch the offensive. And it will not be too surprising if the offensive comes in a direction which nobody expects, like say Kyiv once again.
Okay.
Should they attack Kyiv, the capital, which I am quite think would be a likely aim, can you imagine the implications? They had the same thing which they did in the beginning of the war. From Belarus, troops moved towards Kyiv. Ukraine will be forced to pull out troops from the northeast and the south to counter that threat. So they have gaps out here. And with that, they regain the areas which they had lost to the Ukrainian offensive. So, a Russian counter very likely, and Ukrainian counter-offensive is also equally likely. Like I said, now with the new infusion equipment which they have got, what will the Ukrainians do? By January, both sides will, I would say they would have got a breather. So there's a likelihood that Ukraine may decide to go in for a grandiose offensive in the south, which goes maybe to the area of Mariupol, the major port city, and which will cut off all Russian troops in the south.
Okay.
How it pans out, I would not know, but if you ask me, my military mind tells me the stronger likelihood of a Russian offensive taking place.
What are the chances of things going nuclear?
Of things going nuclear. Honestly, there has been a lot of nuclear saber rattling. And of course, it's only on one side, the Russians, because the Ukrainians have surrendered the nuclear arsenal. But I tend to look at it as just a threat, saber rattling. I do not think Russia will use nuclear weapons, because then they'll play the last card. And then they will draw NATO, they'll draw the world against them. The possibility of a nuclear attack would take place in case of a crushing defeat of Russia. Like for example, if the Ukrainians reach Russian soil, because the Russian nuclear doctrine states that any attack on Russian territory or Russian sovereignty is an attack on Russia, which allows them to use their nuclear weapons. Now, the funny part is they have declared those 4 regions of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk and Donetsk as Russian after that referendum they conducted.
Right.
So does it imply that any attack by the Ukrainians to regain the area is now considered an attack on Russian territory and leave them free to open the nuclear weapons? That is the moot point. But honestly, on a balanced perspective, I think no. At this stage, it's not critical enough, and the Russians would not resort to the nuclear card at this juncture, at least.
So, is peace an option?
Peace, yes. Today, you take a look at it, both sides are actually finding a way out. Putin has got the tiger by the tail and doesn't know how to get off. He expected an easy victory. He has not got that. Now he is expending $1 billion a day. Ukraine is expending around the same amount. Plus, they have lost $500 billion worth of infrastructure. Look at the damage and losses to both sides. Almost 60,000 persons have been killed, wounded, or declared missing in this battle on both sides. They have to have something to show for it. Putin wants a face-saving exit. Ukraine wants Russia to be out of their soil. They are willing, first Zelensky said, I will not negotiate. They have now changed their stance and said, yes, I am willing to negotiate. Now, Putin also says that he is willing to undertake serious negotiations. The problem arises that Zelensky says the start point of any negotiation would be when Russia vacates its territory and goes back to every ounce from each inch of Ukrainian soil. Quite logical. Russia says it's prepared to negotiate anything but the fact that the territory they've occupied is theirs. So you can see there's no common ground. But in case the both parties come to the negotiating table, they sit on the same table at least. And in that, I do feel India can play a big role, especially Modi, by his personal charisma and his personal standing with both the leaders. If they come to the table, you may have a via understand media in which perhaps Russia goes back to its pre-February boundaries. But Crimea, which they annexed in 2014,
Right.
they are allowed to keep. I mean, de facto it is theirs. That could be some kind of a via media which would give a kind of a face-saving exit to both sides. But whether Zelensky or Putin will be open to that, I think we have to delve deeper into their minds to understand it.
Yeah, now if I can ask one more final question. The thing is, what purely in military terms, what can India learn from a war like this? Because you see, we live in a neighborhood which is really, basically, it's a terrible neighborhood. I mean, one side
Right.
we have China, one side we have Pakistan, and then this war is happening.
Right.
What lessons, I mean, the Indian military is learning from this?
Yeah. In this book, in my book, Russia, Ukraine War, I've covered these aspects in great detail. But the thing which has struck me most, if you take a look at what I spoke earlier also, the deciding factor was the level of motivation of the soldier, the training and preparation. Today, the bulwark of the Indian Army lies in the strength of the units and the training motivation levels of officers, GCOs, and the men. So, that is something which we should keep in mind to ensure that this level of motivation always remains and we do not tamper a system which is working so very well. The other thing I want to bring out is the equipment. There has been a lot of talk about, Russian equipment, the tanks have been blown up, it's not good. No, that's not the case. I personally operate in T-72 tanks, in T-55, they're beautiful tanks. There's nothing wrong in that. In the handling of armor, which the Russians have done, there are a lot of mistakes. We can see at the tactical level. So, again, my deduction are drawn of the videos and readings from open sources. But even as a military man, one glance tells me that the tactics many of the Russians were following, like they were too close to each other, they were bunched up in the road, they had no mutual support. The basic combat drills were not being followed. So, in any battle, it's been drilled onto us at every level. Your basic troop level and platoon level tactics have to be very good for you to find a plan to survive. The third important thing is technology. And I'm not talking about high tech here. I'm talking about low tech. Because the Russians invested a lot in high tech weaponry. But again, in basic things like bulletproof jackets, night vision devices, and things like that which the troops should have been equipped with, they did not have it. And they paid the price for it. The Ukrainians invested in small things like drones. Drones have been the game changer in this battle. And you know how they use drones? When they ran short of drones, they've actually taken drones which are used to deliver pizza and deliver Amazon products. Got the operators to act as operators, and these drones were fitted with cameras which became the eyes over which targets could be identified and targeted. Using in this kind of innovation will make so much of a difference. And lastly, it is the manner, I will not go so much on naval aspects, but the air aspects. The manner in which Russia has used its air has actually been baffling. I would say it's timid. I but really cannot understand why was air supremacy not established at the initial days of the war itself. So that conjunction of air naval and ground action has to be done at each time. And lastly, it is in that winning of the war of perception. Perception management is something in future wars which is very important. And when we like we got two adversaries. Fortunately, our point of view has been conveyed very well to the rest of the world, and we got the world on our sides. But ensuring that we always win the perception war and our narrative is gone out to the world is something we must keep in mind in future conflicts as well.
Thank you, Colonel Ajay Singh. All the best to your book. Thank you for coming to this show. Let us hope, the war does not escalate and peace prevails. These two leaders, they come to the negotiating table, and maybe if India needs to give a push, we can give that push. And even if without our push, if they come to the negotiating table, it's good for the world. It's best for all of us. Thank you so much for appearing on this show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here with you on the show.